welcome everyone to today's call. This is what we were intending to be an info session for the Remembering Retreat, which is happening in October 19th to 22nd. And yeah, we have a few of us from here on the facilitation team and staff team of Soil. So I'm NikiAnne. I'm one of the co-directors of the School of Integrated Living and one of the co-facilitators for the retreat. And I'm delighted to be here with Debbie Leinhart, who is a co-director as well with the School of Integrated Living, and Chloe Lieberman, who's one of the co-facilitators of the retreat itself. And we just wanted to make time to see what questions were in the field for folks who might be on the fence or curious about what's going on that's maybe hard to find on the website. And then we can shape our call together based on that inquiry. So the invitation is to, in the chat box, share something you're wanting to get out of this call or a question you have, or unmute yourself and just share it into the space together, whatever's more comfortable for you. And we'll gather that info, and then Chloe and I will, and Debbie perhaps, will meet you where those questions are. We're pretty excited. We've been in organizing mode, preparing. So the group chat is open. And again, just feel free to unmute yourself. Like, what would be most useful to get out of this call? Yeah, Nicole, you want to jump in?
Yes, my question, I looked at the page on the website and I looked at the prior video that had been posted, and I'm really curious about the program itself, and was hoping that you might be able to give some examples of like what the sessions might be, or what kinds of activities might be present. I think I'm trying to figure out if it's for me, and I would just appreciate hearing more about the program itself.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Giuseppe.
Hello, good morning. So I think some of my curiosities, I'll kind of ramble off a few. One is just the group size, group dynamic in terms of ratio. Are these sessions that are like the morning, mid-afternoon, and evening sessions all as one big group? Are there split outs and breakouts? How's that format? Where do you cap the size at? And I'm curious to understand more about if there are different, I guess, tenements of thought around like how is NVC incorporated into this, or how is IFS, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, or other things that might shape or be part of the format to the sessions and to the teachings. And as facilitators, are you open to, or have you ever shared prior attendees, assuming there's been a remembering retreat before, as a reference that we might be able to reach out to and get their take on how their experience went?
Mm-hmm.
So those are some thoughts I thought I could add to the
Mm-hmm.
pile.
Yeah, that last question, the question is, would prior attendees be available to share their experience if you, okay, great. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, if things emerge, feel free to jot them down, put them in the chat. We'll open up again for other questions at the end. The intention is to be on the call between 30 and 45 minutes. And if you need to drop off, no big deal. And you'll still get the recording. All right. Debbie, Chloe, is there anything you want to lead off with? Okay. Well, I did take some notes on what those questions were, and we'll share. I intend to get to all those. Please remind me if I didn't. And just to open up with some broad context. One, we're really excited. We're in the deeper organization mode, and so things are starting to reveal what they want to be this year. And yeah, just to kind of name that, like the Remembering Retreat is in its second year as in form. I think it's lived longer than that in existence, and it is a space that is there's a lot of content that's been thought through and formed to be a really nice arc of a 4 days, and there's an adaptability of the space that's, when us as facilitators are trying to be astute and attuned to what's alive and what's needed in a moment. And so then there's also space for adaptation and co-creation based on the group itself. So yes, there's a lot of what we intend to be, and there's room for movement. And that's somewhat of a dance that's somewhat difficult to communicate, and why maybe the website is a little like, what is going on? Because it's not a formulaic curriculum that this is how it's going to be, and it's rigid. And I would say that when I just mentioned this arc, one of the forms that's influenced that is the work with Joanna Macy and the work that reconnects. And she has a spiral that work has a spiral that's coming with gratitude and welcome, and then being with our pain and befriending our grief, and then connecting with new eyes to the world and really emerging with that renewal. And then how do we take that forth and integrate that into our lives? And so that's kind of the movement and shape. So the activities or the invitations or the prompts are really with an energy that's fitting for what feels like just a natural human way to relate to deep work, to a group process. And so we hold that with care, of really trying to match the moment with and yeah, be congruent with how we show up to a space. Wow, being in a new group is awkward, and I can be fearful about what that's going to be like. And so really tending to those the parts of ourselves, and really not opening up like a huge can of worms and going into deep space on the last day. Like that wouldn't be like supportive of people's process, in my opinion. So that's kind of like some of the essence and flavor of some care we're holding. That question around examples of things we'll be doing, I do want to share. And I also want to name that there's a gift that I want to bring, and that I've been gifted by many teachers and mentors of mine, which is honoring the mystery and not revealing all that lives in the space together before we're there. And so I want to just acknowledge there's a dynamic there of like wanting those parts of ourselves that want to know and that might be nervous, and that there's an element of mystery and co-creation that happens. So with that as a little bit of a caveat, to say that we are, and this is maybe bridging those questions of Nicole and Giuseppe, we do move between large group activities and smaller groups and pairs and solo work. And so we kind of titrate between those sizes throughout, for many reasons, because it's the moment that would most serve us to be solo, or we want to feel connected and hear each other, and that'd be more of a large group. But also because there's exhaustion that can happen with all group all the time, and there's also isolation and disconnection that can happen if it's too much solo time. So we're trying to like meet the moment where in ways that seem fitting. And so that's moving between in a movement way, like being on the land, out with a facilitated guided prompt, or solo time, maybe call that a sit spot, or just time, self-relationship with nature. We might be in having more word-centered activities where we're sharing through our words, what's alive in our bodies and hearts. Everything is an invitation. There's no should, there's no demand on participation to look a certain way. We're holding the container that participation looks many different ways. There's songs involved. There's, really working with the nonverbal ways of belonging and connection. Ritual is at the heart of it, at the heart of our time together. And ritual can be described in many ways. I would say that it's non-denominational. It's coming like anyone, all beliefs, all faiths are welcome as far as how to engage with ritual. And it's really, I think we're holding it in a way that makes space for all ways to engage in all beliefs to be there. So at the heart of ritual for me is an intention, a belief in the beyond and the invisible and something greater than oneself, and paying attention. So that's just like a simple way to say what ritual might be looking like. I want to kind of like push pause there, make some space for Chloe to chime in, and come and kind of, Chloe, to anything you want to speak to, but right now is like, what do you know of as like the sessions or the spaces looking like that?
Yeah, we just were doing some planning around this, so it's like alive in my mind. And I really liked the way on our previous call that Myrna, who is another co-facilitator and is not here, but will be there during the retreat, spoke of this rhythm of kind of like doing a thing, opening up a thing, and then digestion and reflection on the thing. And so this kind of arc of having activities, and kind of in relationship with the question around like NVC, IFS, diversity, equity, what are the shaping principles? We can get more into those, but my understanding is like, it's not like a training on a particular modality that's going to happen. It's more like a group space that is informed by some of those different modalities. And rather than really a way for our intellectual minds to like grok a modality or an approach, it's more a way for our whole beings to be in relationship with that modality and approach in a group. So I think the name Remembering Retreat is really apt because, like NikiAnne said, we are going to be pulling on specific activities. It's not going to be just loosey-goosey, we're hanging out together, connecting. There are, there's a flow and an arc and prompts and containment, very much so. And it's also a way to be moving through exploring these different skills for belonging and the feelings and the absence of those skills, and to reconnect with remember these ways that are innately human and that we all innately have access to, and kind of the structure supporting that reconnection, and also supporting tenderness around the blocks and barriers to that reconnection, or whatever severed that connection in the first place. So I know it's funny, I'm like, I want to be really specific, and it's just not a like, step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of thing. But that's what I would say. And also just, we were really discussing earlier today, and this is like in our minds as we approach our space together, like this way that we have containment and flow and structure and prompts so that we move together, and so that folks, know what to expect and feel comfortable and feel contained, but also pushing the edge of like quiet time together where we aren't saying anything or expressing ourselves and moving through reflection in a different way than we might be used to. And so it's not intended to be a space where everyone like feels uncomfortable the whole time at all, but to push our edges, and in a way of just inquiring and noticing, like, oh, normally, we would be chit-chatting about our days during this kind of space, but we're going to practice really intentional silence, or we're going to practice greeting somebody without words and just looking in their eyes for a few moments, things like that, where we're kind of like playing with our habits in relationship with each other and in relationship with ourselves and the more than human world, and noticing what those habits are and how they may be limiting, and exploring new ways of having those relationships. So yeah, I think that's all that I have for now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that question, will NVC be present, or how has that worked with, Chloe said we're not working with any modality, or there's no teaching like in a workshop way. Like it's named a retreat to be more in that enlivening nourishment. We're going back into the fabric of our whole lives as ourselves, but a brighter, fuller, more truthful expression of ourselves. And NVC, which is nonviolent communication, or often referred to as compassionate communication, is one of our membership requirements here at Earth Haven. And so it's in the fabric of our being and practice of being together. So I'd imagine it's showing up in how we are organically, and may it be so. And you mentioned internal family systems, and although I haven't been fully or explicitly trained in that, that concept of parts work is definitely alive in our speech. Excuse me. Just to unpack that a little bit, I think many of us were taught to use I statements as a way to take responsibility for our feelings and our what is ours. And I think how I see parts work, whether it's internal family systems or another name, is going beyond the I, like all the I's that live in me, all the villagers that live in me, and all the guests, invited and uninvited. And that's definitely a part of what we're working with is, who are those exiled beings in us, that those parts that we shame internally, that have been shamed potentially externally. And so we're not living a full version of ourselves. And so the landscape, the terrain that we're traveling together in that space is really to honor and welcome all of our parts. This part belongs to. And so may that be a liberating process. May that, if it takes us into our pain or grief, may we go there so that we can actually integrate that part, so it's not being played out unhealthily or in a way that's taking our life energy. And so I think another just point on that is that if it's true that all of our parts are welcome and we're honoring our whole selves, like that is that inclusion and that diversity. And so, I mean, I live with the belief that, that gratitude is our prayer, that gratitude is that acknowledgement of giving, of that I am all those parts, I am of all my lineage, and that lineage is with us in the space. And so, yeah, there's a lot more to say, but I just want to name that, like that is at the heart of our remembering ourselves together. Yes, us as humans. Yes, us as humans as a part of the ecosystem, and yes, all those parts of me as my little one individual, unique soul, inherited self, soul, incarnate self.
I want to add just a couple more words on the like lineages and teachings that are coming together here. And because, yeah, like you said, NVC, compassionate communication, the work of Marshall Rosenberg and folks who've played that out and continue to explore that is present here at Earth Haven in our community. And teachings from Sabanfu Somé around grief and Melodoma Somé around grief, teachings from Martine Prechtel, there's teachings from Joanna Macy, who was already mentioned. We could list off in terms of NikiAnne's background and my background and everybody, who's going to be on the facilitator team, like different teachers and mentors and teachings that have come into us. We don't know how to list off all of the different teachers and mentors and guides that have come into everyone who's coming, because we don't know, and it would be a vast number. And so to me, part of the beauty of this retreat is that the actual elements of what we're going into, kind of that spiral that NikiAnne mentioned, are very simple. And they leave space, like she was saying, for different belief systems, different practices to come forward. And so it's almost like, I feel like a little fledgling or something, where it's like, we're not doing what this teacher taught us to do. We're digesting what many teachers and many teachings have seeded in us, and creating a space where we can all be in more of like an active participant role in expressing those things and exploring those things in a group. So not to discredit or devalue or disrespect the lineages that are present, of which there are many, but also say that this is kind of like the maturation of an integration of many of those teachings into a space where we can bring also ourselves and the teachings, like the soul teachings that come through us as individuals. And that's not just the facilitation team, but everybody who's participating too, you know, like everybody's contributions to how we hold grief, how we express grief, how we hold gratitude, how we express gratitude, these sort of basic, simple parts about being human that exist in all of us. So just, that's like how I conceptualize part of an answer to that question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was at a grief ritual with Sabamfu, who Chloe just mentioned, which Sabamfu and Malidoma are of the Dagara people from Burkina Faso, and they got sent by their elders to the West to bring ritual back to the West. And a grief ritual was one of the rituals that they led many people in. And you know, at the end of this grief ritual, end of a weekend, you know, people were so enlivened, so supported in being this whole human. And the question would always come of like, well, how do we do this outside of this space, Sabamfu? Like, you know, we are not sanctioned to do this grief ritual in the Dagara way as you're doing it. So now what? How do we continue as community? And she said, whatever you do, don't not grieve. And everywhere there's nature, and Mama Earth, nature can hold your grief, and do it together, because being witnessed and held is more transformative than doing it alone. And that was the takeaway. And she basically was saying, yes, you know, you can learn from what you experienced here, but do you all. And here, you know, here's some rememberings of what all of our people did together. And so just really, yeah, feeling grateful for that question being asked to that teacher, to that facilitator at that time. Yeah, so it's like finding permission to grieve, and to grieve together, and that's a pathway, a massively transformative pathway to liberating joy and health and vitality. One of the things I love about the grief rituals with her, she'd be like, all right, who's got the bad jokes? And like, that would be the ending, was just like joke time. And so that feeling of like lightness and expansiveness seems to be connected to this journey of grieving together. And so that's what I've experienced in not only this space, but many spaces that are befriending grief. Yeah. For our life's truth to be unfolded. Mm-hmm. Let's see, I'd like to circle back to the facilitator participant ratios. Is there a limit to the container for registrants? Great question. Yeah, both min to make it viable and a max. We are past our minimum. We are over 20 people in the room, and 30 will be the max. We are in a beautiful, beautiful wooden yurt up in Dancing Shiva neighborhood, which is one of our more secluded neighborhoods at Earth Haven for the majority of the retreat. And the neighborhood is what they say is a monastic neighborhood. They particularly devote themselves to Tantra consciousness, and that's not necessarily what we're doing, but they've made the space open to us. But just to say, I mean, the way they steward the land, the trees are old in that neighborhood, particularly really developed, and and it's very hilly. And so we're kind of at the top of some treetops in some of the vantage points we're at. So it's a pretty magical place. And we'll be up there probably 2/3 of the time. And then some of the time we'd be out deeper into the forest and a little bit in the village center in the council hall and our 3-season kitchen and central fire. So yeah, we'll be moving in our bodies. And that neighborhood's about a 10-minute walk from the village center. And so far, for everyone that is registered, we would be, for those who are staying on the land, being our lodging, camping and indoor lodging up in that neighborhood. So it kind of keeps our little retreat cohort together in the interstitial time too. So people can be connecting with the land and each other, even when we're not in session, without too much effort. Any other questions that are alive for folks? Glad you joined, Letitia. You weren't here at the beginning, but it's nice to see you now.
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me. Just listening.
Great. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat box or ask them now. Chloe, I'm curious if there's anything else you want to unfold as retreat disclosure. And as you're thinking, just to say that Debbie was also a participant last year, and if you feel called, Debbie, to share what that experience was like for you, that would at least address part of what Giuseppe was looking for.
Sure. Yeah. As definitely an introvert and someone who's like, I don't want things to get too edgy. I always felt safe enough around the activities, and we're not trying to scare anybody, or you don't have to go any deeper than you want to, but the invitation is there. And yeah, a lot of there's quite a few Earth Haveners who come, and so we've mostly been trained in NVC and are good at holding space and are pretty grounded and these kinds of things. So it ends up being a pretty sweet gathering. The food's really good too. She hasn't mentioned that at all, but yeah. And it's a beautiful place in the forest, and lots of room to walk around and, meditate and do what you want. I was checking, and I think right now we're about 3/4 women and 1/4 men, if that's interesting to you. So yeah. Not sure. I'm happy to answer other questions, either here or offline. And we do have some other returning attendees as well. So I'm sure that someone would be willing to talk with anybody. So.
Yeah, just to also share what little bit I know of the participants, the people in the room, that I know there's some of us in our 20s all the way to our 80s in the space together. I think our 80s, at least our 70s.
Yeah, I just want to speak to one more piece, which NikiAnne and I were speaking to. Is kind of like a part that I really feel drawn to hold, which is like the bridge that can connect this experience, if you choose to participate, and your day-to-day life. And that, with retreats, sometimes we can go, I know I can go to a retreat and be like, oh, I'm in the retreat and I'm feeling so connected. And then I go home and I'm kind of like, oh, that was like kind of like a dream, or it's this distant thing. And so the hope is that some of what we explore, some of what we practice together, maybe a song, maybe a simple practice, maybe a connection, however it organically unfolds for each person, is something that can be carried home with folks, and that this can really seed a deeper sense of belonging in our individual lives. So we're not going to all be best friends and stay connected and be on a Zoom call every week together with this cohort of people, but just remembering and practicing these skills ideally, you know, some of them will trickle into our day-to-day lives and really root themselves in our hearts and our beings. And so that's the hope with the retreat. It's not just like stepping out of life into a space that is what we all long for it to be and what it could be, but really actually strengthening the muscles and the capacity to bring some of these skills for belonging into our day-to-day lives, into our communities, into our families. So yeah, that's just in my mind as part of the intention and part of the hope. And so you're not going to go home like, I got certified in NVC and I'm now going to teach classes on NVC, not that kind of skill building, but more just like an anchoring in the body and in the being of what it does mean to feel at home here together. And hopefully that can ripple out into all of our lives.
Yeah, and that really just speaks to the underpinning of the naming of the retreat, the Remembering Retreat, cultivating home and community from the inside out. And just having experienced here at Earth Haven, but in my life through time, so much of that disempowered approach to belonging of like someone else has the permission to give me to belong, or they're going to tell me I'm fit or not, and just changing that relationship. And not having it be such an external validation, but really something that we're cultivating in ourselves as a way of orienting to our whole lives, to hopefully be less painful of relating to the world. And I also was just thinking that there's at least 6 people who were in the retreat last year that are coming back this year. So it's fun to know that it really seems to be serving as this place of renewal. And it's not like, oh yeah, check, did that. It's like, oh, right. I have my routine life, and whether I like that or not, or it's working for me. And then I choose to step in this time at a time into this more ritualistic space to renew what I know to be true, or what I want to be more alive in my life. And again, integrate that in. So we're really going to be working with the season of autumn and fall. We just crossed this fall equinox and going to be preparing for winter. And so what does that look like to be relating to the seasons within that are being supported and modeled by outside of us in our ecosystem? So the seasonality is integral into the cycle of renewal and belonging in that space.